Good morning, everyone. I am California Attorney General Rob Bonta. Thank you all for joining us. We're here today to announce a lawsuit challenging the Trump administration for conducting an illegal mass firing of nearly half of all employees at the U.S. Department of Education. As part of the president's directive to eliminate the Department of Education, this en masse firing exceeds any statutory authority granted by Congress. Alongside numerous other actions the Trump administration has taken, this sweeping mass firing is simply put illegal. Unfortunately, this is yet another example of my office, our offices, following through on promises we made. We'll take action if and when Trump violates the law and infringes on our rights. I, alongside 20 other attorneys general, allege that the Trump administration's directive to shut down the Department of Education through a massive reduction in force is unlawful and cannot stand. This mass firing of nearly half of the department's workforce is in violation of the Federal Administrative Procedures Act because an agency cannot use a reduction in force to override the limitations on their own power to dismantle agency functions required by law. What's so troubling here is that the reduction in force is so severe and so extreme that it incapacitates the department from performing statutory functions, which will deeply hurt the states represented here and others. Let me be clear, only Congress can make such drastic changes, not the agency, not the president. There's no question that the president's attempt to dismantle the Department of Education exceeds executive authority. As a result of these unconscionably disruptive actions, we're seeking declaratory relief, an order vacating the defendant's actions implementing President Trump's directive to dismantle the Department of Education, and preliminary and permanent injunctive relief to enjoin the agency defendants from implementing the Trump administration's directive to dismantle the Department of Education, including through ordering a reduction in force. The president has yet again overstepped his authority by a mile, and will hold him accountable. While Trump and Elon Musk may tout these cuts in our federal workforce as cost saving, we have to ask ourselves, what will the long-term cost to our nation be? The answer is tremendous. It means cuts to early childhood education, which we know has a monumental impact on children's development, school readiness, and future success. It means cuts to special education, which is vital to removing learning barriers and tailoring instruction to individual student needs. It means cuts to technical education programs, which carve out important pathways that help meet the demand of the skilled labor market. In 2022, out of 37 developed nations, American students ranked 28th in math and 12th in science. Those numbers don't stand a chance without the invaluable programs the Department of Education provides, including assistance to children from low-income families, vocational training, enforcement of anti-discrimination laws, alongside countless other responsibilities fundamental to our educational system. How can we as a nation expect to lead the world's technological and scientific developments when we're falling behind in basic geometry and biology? President Trump can shout America first all he wants, but his anti-education agenda will only ensure we come in dead last. As Attorney General, as a father, as someone who cares about the trajectory of our state and nation, I can't sit back while the president attempts to kick our kids' futures to the curb. Trump may have forgotten to read up on the restrictions of his constitutional authority, perhaps because he's too busy turning the White House into a car dealership. But I won't, and we won't sit back while he violates the law. That means that we'll see the Trump administration in court again. We don't expect the president's barrage of unlawful, chaotic, and disruptive executive orders and actions to slow down, which means neither will our work ahead. Fortunately, I know we'll be able to weather the storm because of the dedication and tenacity of the folks on our teams across the country. Before I turn it over, I just want to shout out the folks at California DOJ who made today's action possible. Lucia Choi, Natasha Reyes, Sri Panchalam, Jim Stanley, Michael Newman, Miranda Mason, Satoshi Yanai, Christina Bull-Arndt, Damon Brown, and Evan Akron. Thank you, and now it's my honor to pass it on to my colleague and friend, Massachusetts Attorney General, Andrea Campbell.
Thank you, Attorney General Bonta. Good morning, everyone. We are here today to announce yet another action by attorneys general taking, of course, Trump administration to court to hold them accountable for violating the law. I am delighted to be with my co-leads today, and together we have led a group of 21 AGs in suing this administration for their attempt to dismantle the Department of Education, a department deeply responsible for helping all students in this country learn and thrive. The Department of Education serves nearly 1 million students in Massachusetts, and K through 12 schools here receive nearly $2 billion each year from the federal government. This funding we rely on to support a variety of educational programs and needs, things like special education, teacher salaries and benefits, social workers, professional development programs, after-school programs, reading and language specialists, transportation, and so much more. And every day, the department helps make sure our students are set up to succeed, from protecting their civil rights to ensuring they have access to student loans that make it possible to attend a college. Indeed, the department touches nearly every aspect of education, and losing it would deprive students, especially low-income students and students with disabilities, of the resources and support they need. And those impacts would be felt beyond just K through 12 schools. Colleges and universities will become more expensive as federal funding for Pell Grants, work-study programs, and loans will be put at risk. On Tuesday, the Department of Education announced it would be eliminating nearly half of its workforce, terminating nearly 2,000 employees. The Trump administration has made it crystal clear that its end goal is to dismantle the department and that these terminations will help do that. But as I've stated before, the president is not a king. He does not have the power to dismantle federal agencies that were created by Congress or to change the responsibilities of those agencies required of them by law. Only Congress can abolish an agency it creates. And each time Congress has been faced with the option to abolish the Department of Education, it has chosen not to do so. The president has shown nothing but blatant disregard for the rule of law and, sadly, cruelty towards our people, and in this case, our young people. And so once again, we as attorneys general are holding him and his administration accountable. We filed our lawsuit here in Massachusetts, which has the strongest education system in the country. We are home to some of the top schools, from kindergarten to higher education. We lead the nation in student achievement. We have universal free school meals, free community college for students over the age of 25. Because in Massachusetts, the birthplace of public education, we believe every student deserves equal access to a high-quality education regardless of their background. And the administration's recent workforce reduction directly threatens our students' ability to learn in an environment free from discrimination. Here in Massachusetts, the Boston location of the department's Office of Civil Rights has been shut down. That office is responsible for safeguarding and equal access to education and holding schools accountable for addressing discrimination and hate incidents, which sadly are on the rise here in Massachusetts. As an attorney general, as a public school kid, and a mom of 2 young boys attending public schools, I can't sit idly by, similar to my colleagues and co-leads here on this Zoom, as we watch our federal government put our families' educational opportunities at risk. Our kids should not be political pawns. We can address bloated bureaucracies lawfully and effectively, and the recent actions by the federal administration does not. That's why we're asking the court to prevent the administration from dismantling the Department of Education or from implementing any policies that would advance that directive. I'm honored to be here with my co-leads, and it is my honor to pass it on to my colleague from Hawaii, Attorney General Ann Lopez.
Thank you, General Campbell. It is a pleasure for me to be here today, but it's also distressing as a child of public school teachers and having gone to public schools. I am today a product of what the President of the United States is trying to dismantle. Once again, as my colleagues have said, he has used power in excess of the office of the presidency. I made a commitment when I started this job that I would continue to enforce the rule of law. I never expected that this would be a daily activity against the United States of America. We have to stop the president in these continuing actions where he oversteps his power and puts himself above Congress. I think we all agree that a free quality education is a fundamental right to every child in America. It doesn't matter what state you live in, whether it's red or blue. It is crucial to America that every child have access to education. And it doesn't matter what color they are, what income they come from, whether or not they have a disability. Every child needs to learn and grow, and the public school system is what allows that to happen. If these cuts go through and the dismantling of the Department of Education proceeds, it will be catastrophic to Hawaii. While much smaller than my colleagues' states, Hawaii gets about, just for K through 12, $250 million a year. Those monies go to school lunches in the amount of approximately $70 million a year. It goes to our special ed students to make sure that they are able to attend school with their peers. I joined this lawsuit again because this is a fundamental right that every child has to have access to, and we need to bring this call to action to every parent of a child in public school so that they can help fight against this dismantling. The idea that the president wants to bring education back to the states is simply an empty talking point. The states have always had the responsibility to provide the policy and basic funding for education. What the United States Department of Education does is make sure that every child can attend school in a dozen different ways that my colleagues have already described. I want to thank the people on my team who have been supporting this effort, Kaliko Fernandez and David Day and Tony Schwartz. Without their help, Hawaii certainly couldn't have been a part of this process. I also want to thank the other Democratic attorneys general. We are a solid wall against the illegal actions of this administration, and we will continue to be a collective, strong force for the rule of law. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the Attorney General from the great state of New York, Letitia James.
Thank you so much. It truly is an honor and a privilege to be here with my colleagues because defunding the Department of Education will harm millions of American students. And this is what the Trump administration is trying to do by gutting the Department of Education. This effort will make it harder for students to learn and get the well-rounded education they deserved. And that's why my colleagues and I are fighting back. We filed our lawsuit to put a stop to the mass layoffs and cuts to the Department of Education that this administration is trying to carry out, because we know that these cuts are aimed to end the agency as a force for good and for student access. Dismantling the Department of Education would be devastating for the over 50 million K through 12 students across this country. Over 50 million children are in its crosshairs. It is their education that is at stake here. Here in New York, our K through 12 schools received over $6 billion from the Department of Education last year. And as a proud product of New York public schools, I will fight to ensure they receive the support that our millions of students deserve. Additionally, New York college students receive more Pell Grants than almost any other state. The most vulnerable students, those who come from low-income families or have special needs, will be the most impacted by these cuts. Department of Education funds ensure that students with special needs have teachers and local workers that can support them. They provide more resources for schools that serve low-income populations. And they support schools in rural areas that often lack sufficient staff and resources. The Department of Education also defends the rights and safety of every student. The Office of Civil Rights protects students from discrimination and sexual assault, and firing staff that work in this office would put students in danger. The Trump administration's efforts to eliminate the Department of Education are not only wrong, they are illegal. And the president does not have the power to dismantle an agency that Congress established by law. And the president cannot cut off funds that Congress appropriated with a stroke of a Sharpie. The administration's attempt to deprive our children of a quality of education is reckless, wrong, and immoral. And just as we have done with their other destructive policies, we're going to put a stop to it. Because for all of us, this is just another day of chaos, confusion, and contempt of government. And we won't allow it. I thank Attorneys General Bonta, Campbell, and Lopez, and all of our colleagues who have joined in this lawsuit for their partnership in this effort to protect students and our schools and our educators and the many millions of families who rely on them each and every day. Today, I know we will protect our students, and today I stand with my colleagues in support of the rule of law. Thank you.
If you would like to ask a question, you may do so by clicking on the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen. You will then be moved into the queue. Please wait to speak until I invite you to state your question. We'll then unmute your mic. You may also use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to ask your question. And our first question comes from Rick. Rick, you are now unmuted.
Hi, thanks for doing this and for taking my question. I am a reporter with the Chronicle of Higher Education, and we've been covering what's happened in Maine with the Trump administration attempting to withhold some funding, although it's now been released through the USDA for the University of Maine system, apparently after a spat between the governor and the president. So I'm curious, do you have any concern that cases like this could bring on retaliation from the Trump administration?
I can start. I'm sure all my colleagues have something to add here. No, we signed up not only to become attorney generals of our state, and take that responsibility extremely seriously. I'm the first Black woman to serve as AG in Massachusetts. And I tell my constituents, it doesn't matter that I'm the first if I don't stand up and exercise the courage that is necessary in this moment in time to fight back against an administration that seems bent on creating chaos and confusion, to create fear in our communities, and most importantly, to continue to take actions that are unlawful. We are here not only to defend the rule of law, but to protect our residents and to protect our respective states' economies. And it's our job to stand up. And we would hope that we could actually collaborate with this administration on addressing educational issues and economic issues in our respective states. But unfortunately, we continue to have to go to court to hold them accountable. And so I will continue to do that on behalf of the residents and companies and others here in Massachusetts, and do it without any fear of retribution, because we know why we do this work. I know why I do this work, and most importantly, who I serve. And in this context, it is the most vulnerable who need our advocacy the most.
Let me also join by saying that in another lawsuit that we brought against the Office of Management and Budget, against a number of federal agencies that sought to pause federal funds, we amended our complaint to add additional federal agencies, but we also sought a motion to enforce when federal agencies unfortunately continued to pause and freeze funds from a number of agencies across this nation. That issue was resolved, and we did not have to file a motion for contempt. But in the event that, in fact, this government, this federal government, refuses to comply with federally court orders, we are prepared to use all of our legal options at our disposal.
Yeah, and I'll just add that we are immovable, relentless, and unapologetic in our commitment to upholding the rule of law. It's not a lot to ask that the President of the United States follow the law and comply with the Constitution. It is foundational. It is part of who we are. This is what we do. And so the president will do what he does. He's unpredictable. He's been reckless and dangerous. And we are not concerned about that. We're concerned about the people that we're protecting, the rule of law that, when upheld, ensures that congressional intent is carried out and critical essential services are delivered to the American people. And so we're here yet again, our 8th lawsuit. And we only sue when something unlawful has been done. If all we have is political grievance or ideological difference, we have absolutely nothing to do in court. But when the law is broken by the President of the United States, it is our job, our duty. We will continue to do it, again, unapologetically and immovably, to make sure the rule of law in the United States of America is followed.
And Rick,
Thank you.
I'll just also do a quick follow-up. In my public school, if a bully like President Trump was on the playground, he would have been expelled. He would have been taken off the playground, and he would no longer be a part of our class. What he does is no different than that bully on every playground that we find in schools. And it is our job to make sure that we're strong enough to withstand whatever he wants to put forward, because what he does is simply unconscionable and unacceptable.
Thank you. Our second question comes from John. John, you are now unmuted.
Thank you for taking the question. I'm John Hilliard with the Boston Globe, and given the scope of cuts that have occurred at the U.S. Department of Education, I was wondering, does this suit do anything to restore any of those cuts? Because the dramatic reduction in workforce for that agency, or is there anything that that states can do legally to compel the government to rehire these folks?
This is Ann. The relief that we're seeking is to ensure that those employees who have already been RIFed as part of the reduction in force are returned to their jobs, and that the money that has already been appropriated by Congress for all of the programs that exist today continue to flow.
And I'll just add, in many ways, we're getting ahead of what may come. Right now, what we know to be true is that you have a president and an education secretary where their goal is to dismantle this agency in its entirety. So number one, we are pointing out to this court and to the public that they do not have the authority to dismantle an education agency or any agency that was created by Congress. It's unlawful. Second, that the functions of this agency, including those who were recently suspended or let go, they have critical functions that they serve, including, for example, here in Boston in our civil rights division of the Department of Education that was shut down, critical roles that they play. And the disruption of that work and that flow of work is having a major impact on the Commonwealth, on our students, our school districts, and our families. And any potential funding threats that could come as they work to dismantle this agency as a whole will also have a devastating impact on our colleges, universities, students in K through 12 and beyond, and so many other programs that these states rely on to be able to deliver education and a high quality education to our constituents.
Let me say that this lawsuit basically seeks to maintain the status quo, that the actions by the Trump administration basically exceed his authority, that this is a democracy and not a unitarian type of government, that it's arbitrary, that it's capricious, and that, as was mentioned by A.G. Campbell and others, that this agency was created by Congress, and that the President of the United States cannot simply, by signing with a Sharpie, basically ignore the powers of Congress. He's trespassed on their powers. And all that we are doing is enforcing the law, which is enshrined in the Constitution and the rule of law all across this nation. And we would urge him to respect it. We have, in all of our cases thus far, we've been winning. And we're confident that we will seek a TRO and ultimately a preliminary injunction, and that our students and our schools will continue to operate on behalf of the American public.
And I'll just add in response to the question, the prayer of relief at the end of our complaint sets forth the relief that we're seeking, and it includes stopping, we call it enjoining, any additional actions that carry out the order to dismantle the Department of Education. And it also asks for a declaration of unlawfulness or invalidity of the actions taken so far. So they would be invalid, they would be reversed. So there's a reversal component and a blockage of additional action consistent with the executive order. And as AG James mentioned, it would bring us back to the status quo before the order was ever issued.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Bianca. Bianca, you are now unmuted.
Hi, I'm Bianca Quilantan with Politico. Do you have any concerns that some of these employees that have received these RIF notices may not want to come back to the education department after this? It just seems like there's a lot of, maybe the environment might be an issue, or the work that they're being asked to might be an issue. So what are your thoughts on that?
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ann.
I want every person who's currently employed by the federal government to make their own choice about their careers and about their futures. If the Department of Education is no longer a place where they can be respected and treated with kindness and allowed to do their job to the fullest extent, then they should absolutely make a decision to leave. There are too many people who don't simply have an option to not go to work. And we're seeing that certainly in Hawaii with hundreds of federal employees applying for jobs in state government because they fear that they will be without a job very soon. So my hope is that people can return to a quality workplace where they feel proud about the public service they're engaged in. But if they cannot, because it's not that kind of environment, then that's their decision, and I would support that 100%.
Thank you. And our last question comes from Howard. Howard, you are now unmuted.
Hi. I was wondering, did Congress set funding levels for the Office for Civil Rights, for example, and say where it had to be housed? I know that Congress authorized the creation of OCR. And I guess the concurrent concern is, what about the issue of the Trump administration weaponizing the OCR to pursue policies that you would actually oppose and see contrary to the proper mission of that branch of the Education Department?
So let me just say that I don't know the funding formula for the Office of Civil Rights within the Department of Education. But I do know that if, in fact, the Office of Civil Rights were to pursue an action which is inconsistent with federally authorized civil rights statutes, that is an issue that these attorneys general would consider taking action on.
And just a brief follow-up for Attorney General Bonta, is the administration abiding by the TRO in the teacher grants case, or are you going to have to follow up and perhaps pursue a contempt citation? Bonta or anyone else who was on that particular case.
Yeah, let me first answer your first question first, then your second question second. With respect to the first question, the Office of Civil Rights within the Department of Education, that is a congressionally required function of the Department of Education. It must be fulfilled. and it is unlawful and unconstitutional for it to be dismantled the way that the Trump administration has sought to dismantle it. So, and your question, I think, is a separate question. Today, we're addressing the question of its existence, of its ongoing functionality within the Department of Education. And what it does when it's in existence, we can take that issue on if and when it happens. If it is it's supposed to be obviously used to protect students from discrimination, from sexual assault and discrimination based on race or ethnicity or disability and other protected classes. And so if it's not used in that way, we can take that up, do the analysis on its lawfulness or unlawfulness, and take action as appropriate. So far in the teacher grant case, we moved quickly. Our team of AGs, as we often do, filed last Thursday, got a restraining order on Monday. We expect the orders to be followed as we always do, and we're prepared to take steps if they're not, to move to enforce and ratchet up to contempt if necessary. But the orders are the orders of the court. They must be followed by the executive branch, and we'll continue to monitor the compliance and be prepared to take any necessary steps to ensure they're enforced fully.
Thank you. And that's all the time we have for questions.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Everyone.